I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one. The fact is that the consideration.
There we go. That was yesterday. Wow. 6:05 as we get it rolling on a Friday morning on KCMO. I can't unsee the photoshops that have been done of Donald Trump on Kamala Harris's head, or vice versa. Kamala Harris's face on Donald Trump's head. Oh, my goodness. One of them we put up on the KCMO Talk Radio Facebook page, by the way, yesterday. So Joe Biden had his gaffes. He had his moments. Vice President Trump referring to his own VP when asked about Kamala Harris. But in the end, last night was in many ways a worst case scenario for Democrats who want to see Joe out. Because he had his flubs, he had his moments, he lost his train of thought. If you were playing a drinking game where Joe Biden said, the idea or anyway, well, you're probably not awake right now. And if you are, don't get behind the wheel because your blood alcohol level is probably too high to drive.
I missed it last night. So like in the debate, it was the idea that as righteous indignation. Was that what he was doing again?
And then trails to nowhere.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was old Joe, classic Joe. But at the same time, he didn't totally bomb out, in part because the bar was so low. It's funny. I've just had these moments these last couple of weeks where the more I think about Joe Biden and some of the issues he's had, it's very relatable to me in my life dealing with toddlers right now. There's a lot of similarities. And that's true for many of you. If you take care of elderly parents, you have those moments where it is like taking care of your young children 20, 25, 30 years prior. And there are times when I'm watching Joe and that's what it feels like. But the bar was so low yesterday, he got over it. He did. Not because you watched that yesterday and I watched the whole thing start to finish and you said to yourself, I feel confident in that guy as the leader of the free world. You shouldn't. I don't. And it's not because of policy. It's just because, gosh, it's not all there. But he didn't totally crash and burn. So he fights another day. He lives another day. And for Democrats who wanted Joe to really just implode last night, it didn't happen. It just didn't. Now, he said a lot of stuff that made you say, what is this guy talking about? Like how he created 2,000 jobs last week.
Am I getting the job done? Can you name me somebody who's got more major piece of legislation passed in 3.5 years? I created 2,000 jobs just last week.
What?
So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it.
If I slow down,
there's no indication of that yet.
If I slow down, I can't get the job done. I created 2,000 jobs last week. I think what he meant is last week the jobs report came out and there were 200,000 jobs created in the month of June. I believe that's what he was referring to. But once again, the bar was so low that those little mistakes weren't really enough to say, my goodness, how do we move forward? So he's alive and he's not going anywhere. And there's nothing to suggest that he's going to go anywhere. So the big winner last night was Donald Trump. Donald Trump comes out looking like roses because for Donald Trump, he desperately needs Joe Biden to hang around. He needs Joe Biden to be the nominee. Now, I think he could beat whoever they fill him in with outside of probably Michelle Obama, but he could beat Kamala Harris. He could beat George Clooney. George Clooney.
Now, maybe. I saw some stuff.
He could beat Gavin Newsom, two, slicksters out in California. Newsom and Clooney got them mixed up there for a second. He could beat those guys, but still, Trump's best bet is to go up against Joe Biden. Not even a debate. So he needs Joe to hang around. And last night was enough for Joe to hang around. And he was indignant. He's not going anywhere. There's nothing I heard last night that suggests Joe Biden's going to drop out no matter what happens here in the next couple of days. And, there were multiple reports last night suggesting that more members of Congress are going to be asking Joe Biden over the next 48 hours to basically go away, to hand off the reins. But you tell me, if you watched this thing last night, you tell me how you think it's possible that Joe Biden is going to go anywhere. I don't see it. I heard a guy that was insistent that he is the guy to continue on to carry the torch for the party, and he'll hand it off when he damn well pleases. And that's it. And it was not like he was defiant in a way that was genuine. It was classic Joe Biden. He talked about his staff. He talked about the fact that, he's still got work to do. He talked about the fact that he thought he was the best person for the job the next 4 years. That's not a guy who's like on the fence about doing this for another 4 years. This is a guy who is insistent that he continue on in the White House. So that's a problem for the Democratic Party because they've got to see these numbers and they've got to be saying to themselves, this is not going to work out well for us here. And every day that the conversation is about Joe Biden is a day where it's not about Donald Trump. And there's two topics in this race. It can either be Trump or it can be Biden. If you're talking about one, you're not talking about the other. And for the last 2 weeks, all anyone's talked about is Joe Biden. They are begging Donald Trump to get up there, to say something stupid, to say something they could call racist, misogynist, whatever. And to Trump's credit, he's not giving it to him, John.
Right, and Biden tries to bait him out, like, where's Trump?
Yeah.
I'm busy. Where's Trump?
He's on the golf course.
Well, he's not the president, dude. Yeah. So, he's doing what he wants.
Yeah, he's pulling the old basement trick that you did 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? It's working out for him okay right now. 913-408-7957. So this, in many ways, is the worst case scenario for the Democrats coming out of last night because there are gaffes and flubs that will get played over and over and over again. But Joe did not crash and burn. He made enough sense with the low bar that was set to continue on. So now they find themselves once again stuck in the middle, where apparently Obama and Pelosi and people like that are meeting, trying to figure out a way around this, but they realize there's only so much they can do. They really can't force them. And there's nothing I heard from this guy yesterday to suggest that he has any plans on going anywhere. We'll get to you here coming up at 913-408-7957. And yes, between the Vice President Trump gaffe, Joe Biden calling Zelensky Putin gaffe. I mean, there was plenty from last night to work with. But listen, it is going to be a busy morning here on KCMO. And I know it's 6:13 in the morning, but just know this much. Our 9 o'clock hour may be one of our most interesting 9 o'clock hours ever. We have the president of Benedictine College, President Stephen Minnis, who is going to be here for his first sit-down interview since the Harrison Butker commencement speech. I've got my Butker jersey on. Mark has his Kelsey jersey on, and John has his Mahomes jersey on. And then Peter Doocy is going to be here from Fox News. He was not called on by Joe Biden yesterday. What gives? So he's my second favorite Villanova graduate outside of my wife. So Peter Doocy is going to be here at 9:30 on KCMO 95.7 FM. We'll get to you and more from the press conference next.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. Who's going to beat President Putin? President Zelensky.
That's right, yeah. President Zelensky. President Putin, one and the same. One's trying to kill the other one, but, basically the same guy. 6:20, good morning, happy Friday as we get it rolling here on KCMO 95.7 FM. It was not a good press conference for Joe Biden, but it was good enough. And that's what matters. All this is about is whether or not it was good enough to keep Joe alive, literally and figuratively, to fight another day. And that's what he did. And that is the best outcome for Donald Trump. And that is the worst outcome for the Democratic Party. So on and on we go. The speculation will continue on into the weekend, into next week. 913-408-7957. You want to get in. Paul is in Kansas City. Paul, let it rip. Good morning. You're first up.
Hey, Pete, that was the most impressive performance I've seen by a president since Reagan's Brandenburg Gate, tearing down that wall, Mr. Gorbachev. I am just ecstatic with the performance of the president. Let's keep him going. Let's keep rolling. I want the media out there to keep editing the interviews, keep standing up. This is great. I'm impressed. It's a great day to be an American, Pete. Thanks, buddy.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Have a great weekend. Listen, I see what you did there, Paul. And if you are a fan of Donald Trump, then listen, that's obviously how you should be feeling this morning and the approach you should want to take. Because let's not forget, Trump is a historically unpopular figure. But in a binary election, you just have to be more popular than the other guy. Or I should say less popular than the other guy. That may work as well. John's in Topeka. Go ahead, John.
Hey, good morning. Yesterday I was listening to that, what Biden was talking about, and I saw those gaffes. But he said, show me one NATO leader that wasn't impressed with what I said. Well, there was one NATO leader that completely snubbed him and went down and talked to Trump. So
who is
I don't know
that?
if he was that was Orban, for the president of Hungary and his current president of the EU.
Gotcha.
And, so he didn't impress him much.
Yeah.
And the fact is when you look at this, if you're looking at the Democrats like to say, like driving a car, handing over the keys. Honestly, if it was your car and you were going to be driving 500 miles with either Trump or Biden, who would you hand the keys to?
It's not even close. I mean, I got a 91-year-old grandmother. I might trust her more than Joe at this point.
Exactly. We would take keys away from Joe if it was to come down to letting him drive to the store to go get a gallon of milk. He wouldn't know how to buy a gallon of milk or how much a gallon of milk costs nowadays because of the inflation. But the fact is we wouldn't let him drive down to the corner store with our car, let alone give him the keys to the country.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John. I've said it before, but you're hiring for greeters at Walmart, and you would meet the man, and you would be like, yeah, I don't know. And I'm genuinely not saying it to be mean, but you would meet the guy, and you'd hear the way he speaks and the way he interacts, and you'd hear the way he kind of tails off in his conversation and ends mid-sentence. Well, anyway. You'd be like, I don't know. I mean, do I really want that at the front door of the Walmart? And then, he asks for the 10A to 4P shift every day. And you're like, I need you more than that, buddy. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you're dealing with here. It's a reality of the situation.
Now, he could appeal to younger voters when he's starting to trail off. You just do what they say and you go, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Right? If he did that, I think he would have a lot more appeal.
Yeah, Gen Z's would skyrocket in the polls for him,
So, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah. John and Gardner. So, yeah, John, what's up, buddy?
Hey, Pete, good morning. Love your show. Great as always. I got a question. I want to ask your opinion on something, and then I would like to say who I really hope Trump picks as his running mate. And I want to ask your opinion. Does Biden really believe that he's the guy for the job? Does he really believe that he's, doing a good job? Does he really believe he's great for America? Does he buy all the stuff that he's spouting? And then I'm praying that Trump picks Marco Rubio as his running mate. I mean, the Latino vote, I think it's very important. I think Rubio would go down there and get the border thing all straightened out, the whole deal. I just think it'd be an unstoppable team. And also, there were no social issues last night. The questions, from the reporters were all scripted. I didn't hear any, men and women's locker rooms. I didn't hear anything about the border. It was just all, are you well enough, and NATO. So I think I'll leave it there.
Yeah, well, thank you very much there, John. I will answer those in order. Number one, do I think Biden believes he's the guy for the job? Abso-freaking-lutely. Joe Biden has always been and has always put his ambition before just about anything else. Joe Biden ran in 2018 when his family was going through, massive, massive struggles, right? I mean, that's just the reality. The guy has always put his own ambition before just about everything else in his life. 2018, he's got the issues going on with Hunter. He's still a couple of years removed from the death of Bo. And, 8 years of being VP and then, 45 years in Congress wasn't enough. As he approached 80, I'm running for president. And now he's finally got what he's wanted for 50 years. And, in large part, I think what Jill had wanted for a long time as well. He's not giving that up. So I genuinely think he believes it. I don't think it's a shtick. I don't think it's I'm just going to hang around because, well, what else am I going to do? I really think he believes that about himself. Now, as for little Marco, I think Marco Rubio would be an outstanding pick as well. I agree with you there, John. I'm hesitant to think that it's going to help tremendously with the Latino vote. I mean, I think the idea that we view Latinos as like this broad swath of people. There's Mexican Latinos, there's Cubans, there's Puerto Ricans, there's all these different factions. Rubio's, of course, got Cuban descent. I don't know if like Mexican Americans are like, I was on the fence, but then they picked a Cuban. I don't think that's really how it works. But the guy is bilingual, which I think is a tremendous asset to have, to be able to speak to Spanish audiences right now in America. He can pitch the Trump vision, the conservative model for America for the next generation. I think that's a strong suit of his as well. And, I think he certainly has come around on some policy things where maybe he was a little more traditional, old school Republican, George W. Bush-ish on some things. And he's come around on Trump's way of thinking, at least on some issues like foreign policy and things of that nature, which is not nearly as isolationist as people want to make it out to be. I really don't think that that's the case. Don't get me wrong. There are isolationists within the MAGA movement, but I really don't think Trump at his core is one of those isolationist Republicans by any stretch of the imagination. So I think he would be a good pick for sure, but it looks like the way things are trending, J.D. Vance is rising as the favorite. There's speculation now that J.D. Vance is going to be the pick because Donald Trump Jr., who is a big J.D. Vance fan, the senator from Ohio, is set to speak before the VP pick comes down at the RNC next week. So that's the speculation, and the betting markets are leaning heavily offshore on J.D. Vance. And I don't think J.D. Vance does anything for the ticket, by the way. So I don't like the pick, but that's where the betting markets are right now on the VP pick. 913-408-7957. More of you, plus how is the media reacting to all this from last night, coming up next. Well, the media generally embarrassed itself with some of the questions last night in this Joe Biden press conference, which, was fascinating in the standpoint of it's the recent chapter in this unfolding historical moment that we find ourselves in. I've mentioned it the last couple of weeks on the show, but obviously there's been a much heavier national lean to this show the last couple of weeks, but that's because this is a historical moment that we find ourselves in. Up until the debate, it was kind of like ho-hum, Biden, Trump, round two. We got to relive 2020. Neither guy's really all that liked. There was nothing interesting, nothing unique that had really happened up till that point. And then the debate happened. And the last 2 weeks have obviously just been fascinating with the storylines turning over every day, with, new angles to discuss every day. And yesterday was the latest opportunity for Joe Biden to potentially crash and burn. And it could have been the final nail in his coffin for re-election, but it didn't come. The nail was not hammered in. Instead, Joe popped the nail out. He's fighting through it, man. It is very much, I just keep going back to it, but it literally is Joe Biden's Wolf of Wall Street moment.
I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
That was Joe Biden again yesterday. He's not going anywhere.
The fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again.
That's it. And he's indignant on the whole damn thing. Ronnie's in Rosedale. Ronnie, go ahead, my man. You're on KCMO.
Good morning, Pete. I've been with you from the start of the show. I think most of your callers and what you said this morning describes the whole thing pretty good. I was just disappointed. Well, first we waited for an hour and a half.
Oh, I know.
When they first said it was going to start. And I was like you. I listened to the whole thing and watched it straight through. But I was disappointed from the very first because he started reading off the teleprompter and did his ending of the NATO conference. And then there was another section where he read some off of the teleprompter and went, man, this is like the same old Biden administration controlled crap sandwich that they're getting ready to feed to America. And then I was sure of it when he finally got to the reporters for his big boy part. He got out that list of reporters in the order he's supposed to call them, and I went, this is totally controlled.
Yeah, no, you're right, Ronnie. Here's that moment, buddy.
With that, I'll take your questions. I've been given a list of people to call on here.
I mean, that was it right there, Ronnie. And I'm like, okay, this is still not going to be the big boy press conference we were promised.
Yeah, you knew it. You knew it when you got to that part.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. Have a great weekend, Ronnie. I was thinking about it, too. I'm like, I had booked Peter Doocy for today at 9:30, and he's still coming on the show from Fox News, the White House correspondent. And I thought to myself, Peter's going to be there. I hope he gets a question in. And then the minute that Joe breaks out, the little pad, and he's like, oh, I got my list I got to go down. I'm like, well, Peter's not making the list. They're not going to give Peter Doocy a question. Now, I still think it's going to be interesting to hear his thoughts today on what it was like to be in that room and, what his fellow reporters were saying and how they were reacting. But it's like this was not even what they promised earlier in the week when John Kirby said Joe's doing his big boy press conference.
After that, the president will hold a press conference. I guess a big boy press conference is what we're calling it. And take some questions from y'all.
We're calling it. And, yeah, he was an hour and a half late. I don't know if he couldn't find his big boy pants or what exactly happened, but the guy was way late. Remember, this was supposed to be at 5:30 Eastern last night. That's what we were reporting all morning. And then at about 9 o'clock, they push it back to 6:30 Eastern. So they push it back an hour. My thought on why they pushed it back is because if they had it at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central, the nightly news broadcasts would have been able to cut it up and air it on their nightly news broadcasts. So right there, it's like, okay, they don't want the nightly news to be able to kind of react in real time to this press conference. So they push it back an hour. And then it started an hour after that. It didn't start till 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 our time. Because I'm sitting there, our kids go to bed, or our middle one, Chloe, she goes to bed around 7:15, but we start the process 7:15 to 7:30. We start the process of corralling her at about 7 o'clock, give or take, depending on how the mood's going. So I'm like watching this press conference on my phone starting at about 6:30, and I know it was 6:28 he started because I looked at my phone. I said, okay, 6:28, how long's this thing going to go? And he went almost an hour. But I'm watching this, and I'm like, this is 2 hours after it was supposed to start initially, an hour after we were told it was going to start. And, you're getting into 7:30, 8 o'clock Eastern time, but most major networks were carrying this thing last night. So I'm watching it on my phone as I'm trying to, we're all trying to corral the kids, and, it's quite a scene. Quite a scene. But the media has come to the obvious conclusion here that they may be stuck with the guy. And that's why, you heard some of their reaction yesterday, and I thought to myself, wow, they are coming to the conclusion that they may very well be stuck with him. And it was some of the most prominent voices who were out there last night saying, you know what, I guess we've got to go this route. Rachel Maddow was on that list. Mark, I hate to do this in real time to you here, but I thought I had it in the system. Either way, let me give you this Rachel Maddow clip. I'll put it up there in the 635 block for you if you don't mind playing that for me. Rachel Maddow goes on was on, what was she on last night? Oh, she was on MSNBC, obviously, with Chris Hayes after the fact. And let's take a listen to what she had to say after Joe Biden's press conference. Here's Rachel Maddow.
Chris, and I won't go on at length. I will just say, though, you noted that there were some moments of, startlingly impressive command of the issues. This is just my opinion. He is not only strong on foreign policy, he is just fundamentally right on foreign policy in the way that he talks about it. And again, your mileage may vary. That is how I feel about the way he talks about our relationship with our allies and our relationship with NATO. You can hear his command of the issues, particularly in his asides, like mentioning as an offhand way that it was Turkey really that needed really to be talked into an expansion of NATO that included Finland and Sweden, talking about the numbers of Russian troop losses in Ukraine, talking about the fact that he turned in his notes after he spoke privately with President Xi, alluding to the fact that Trump had all those weird meetings with the Russians and Putin in which he had no note taker present. I mean, it's even in the little asides where it just shows you he is a master of the foreign policy field and has been for decades in his career in the Senate, the vice president, and the presidency.
Yep, that's him, the master. Yep, Joe Biden and master. Words that go hand in hand on foreign policy. That is Rachel Maddow, I believe, basically signaling to the biggest and loudest voices in our own party, get off of Biden, get back on Trump. Every day we don't talk about Trump is a good day for Donald Trump, so give it up. Because nobody could actually say that with a straight face. I mean, it's impossible to say with a straight face. Even for Rachel Maddow, who's, pulling in $25 to $30 million a year when she was doing her primetime show on MSNBC, and her popularity rose tremendously based off of a lie, the Trump-Russia collusion lie. I mean, she literally spewed that thing and carried that torch, and it was all a lie. But it banked her $25 to $30 million a year from NBC. And now she's basically signaling, hey, give it up. We're stuck with Joe. We'll say whatever needs to be said, and let's get back to talking about Trump. That, to me, was the message from Rachel Maddow in that commentary last night. Gladstone is where Ed is hanging out. Go ahead, Ed.
Hey, everybody knows why he showed up late. They had to wait for the drugs to kick in.
Well,
you remember what happened when he had to show up at a specific point in time a couple of weeks ago. They were just waiting until he got all wound up, and then they turned him loose.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they were still searching for the big boy pants, but it could have been that. One or the other there, Ed. I think you're onto something there, buddy. Thank you. 913-4087-957. Could have been that. It's entirely possible. Waiting for the good stuff to get going. We'll see. Coming up on KCMO, we've got a lot more to get to on this front. The text line obviously is buzzing. 9 o'clock hour is going to be awesome with Peter Doocy at 9:35. So it's a ways away, but just set the alarms here on KCMO. And President Stephen Minnis from Benedictine College in the wake of the Harrison Butker controversy. He's in studio from 9 to 9:30 here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. We are streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Okay, what are local columnists saying in the wake of last night? What's the tie? What's the pitch? We'll get to it next. This is a normal way to feel on the text line, 913-4087-957. Pete, I fear that Joe Biden's the only one that Donald Trump can beat. That's a reasonable fear to have. I know that, diehard MAGA person will tell you Donald Trump could beat anybody and everybody, even Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. There are people who believe that, but that's just not true. Trump is still a historically unpopular figure, so he needs the right person to go up against him. Now, I think he's played his cards perfectly here as of late by just hiding, by playing golf, trying to lower that handicap, maybe gear up for that match with Joe Biden that he challenged him to earlier in the week in Florida. But that is not an unreasonable thing to feel right now. Trump does need Joe Biden, and he should want Joe Biden. That's why he finds himself challenging Joe Biden and basically toying with Joe Biden in his public comments, where he says things like, I don't think Joe wants to go. Joe's tough. Joe's going to hang around. Joe's not going to let himself be pushed around by the party. He's got an ego. These are all things that Donald Trump has said on and off over the last, couple of weeks since the debate, since the entire conversation has been about whether or not he's going to make it, whether or not he's going to continue on. So that is not a wrong feeling to have on the text line. Now, Trump can beat Kamala Harris. He can beat Gavin Newsom. He can beat fill in the blank. Probably most of them outside of Michelle Obama. But it becomes very close, or much closer than if he's going up against Joe Biden. The best case for Trump is he says, hey, you got 4 years of Joe, you got 4 years of me. Which one were you better off during? That's the only question he's really got to ask. And Joe is historically more unpopular than Donald Trump was at this point of his presidency. So with that information, this is exactly what Donald Trump should want. That is not an unreasonable thing to feel on the text line. So I'm just here to confirm your feelings at 6:52 on a Friday on KCMO. So local media, Kansas City Star had a couple of pieces this week I was getting a chuckle out of because, obviously they're in somewhat of a meltdown mode themselves, trying to figure out what to do. And here's one opinion piece. Guy named Isaac Bailey writes here, headline, if cognitively compromised is the criteria, I know who's not getting my vote. Oh, you know where this is going, right? He goes on to basically say that Trump's the guy who's cognitively impaired. So therefore, Joe's got my vote. And he talks about some of the flubs Trump has made over the years. Remember the time that Trump talked about airports in the Revolutionary War? This was back in 2019. He blamed it on the teleprompter that he mentioned airports during the Revolutionary War. That was pretty lame, and he blamed it on the teleprompter, but whatever. When you got to go back 5 years to point to stupid things Trump has said as an example of his alleged cognitive decline, when I could go back 5 minutes for the guy he's going up against and find his cognitive decline, I don't think that's having the same impact that you think it's having. Isaac Bailey writing this in the Kansas City Star. You can obviously look at this and you can say, hey, I'll never vote for Donald Trump, this, that, the next thing. But I really don't think comparing their cognitive abilities is the approach you want to be taking right now to justify Joe Biden over Donald Trump. 50 to 60 million Americans saw these two guys on stage next to each other for an hour and a half. And instead of just saying, hey, we got to have Joe because I trust the people in his camp. That should be the approach. I trust the people around Joe Biden. Not the guy who's really struggling cognitively is Donald J. Trump.
I know you are, but what am I?
That's kind of where we're at. That's what we're living through right now. I mean, once again, last night was not horrific, but you still have a guy who got up on stage and said this.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president.
Oh, okay. And then this also in the Kansas City Star yesterday. Dion Leffler writes, call me crazy, but I pay good money to watch Biden and Trump play a round of golf. And where does he go? About a third of the way through the piece. Trump is a golf legend, and what he's mainly legendary for is cheating and lying about his scores. Okay. Yeah. If I was to play golf with Donald Trump, I probably would see him fluff the ball up in the rough once or twice. I probably would see him, maybe take that golf cart and race it up to the green and, fluff up his chip off the left side of the green. I'm sure that would probably happen. But once again, if we're going to compare golf games and say, I'd love to see Trump play Biden in golf, but it's because Trump's a cheater on the golf course. It's once again, what are we really accomplishing here? They are really stretching this thing. Just say, it's very simple. Whether it's the Kansas City Star writing about this or it's CNN talking about this on a national level, just say, just at least be honest, right? Just say, yeah, okay, Joe's struggling. He's not what he was 10 years ago. He's not what he was 4 years ago. But I believe in the Democratic playbook and Democratic principles, and Joe Biden's the guy who's going to do what I think needs to be done for the betterment of the country. The polling would suggest most Americans don't agree with that. But at least that's just being honest with your readership and your viewership. At least that's shooting it straight. Instead of this whole, the real guy who's struggling cognitively is none other than Donald Trump. 50 to 60 million Americans watched it with their own two eyes 2 weeks ago. And that's not the takeaway for most people with common sense who are just watching it and taking it all in. Got a minute, Mike, in Kansas City? Go.
Yeah, you really hit on something you said earlier about Trump against other people. In 2016, it would have been Bernie against Trump. I think Bernie would have won. I think the reason why Trump won in 2016 was because Hillary was such a repulsive candidate. And I'm not saying that Trump is like Hillary, but I think there are a lot of people who are going to be voting for Biden because he's not, for Trump because he's not Biden.
Yeah.
I honestly think that's what you're going to be seeing.
Yeah, I think so, too. I mean, listen, these binary presidential races oftentimes become indictments against somebody, people voting against somebody. And Trump's better off going up against Biden, who will have more people vote against him for Donald than just about anybody else he could go up against. Bank of America survey, just for those of you on the text line saying the airlines are a mess and people are traveling at record numbers. Bank of America survey that got cited that we were telling you about the other day on Bloomberg. 47% of people from this Bank of America travel survey said that they planned on staying put this summer. And they're attributing that to the high cost of living. So basically, they're foregoing a summer vacation in part because the cost of everyday life has chipped away at some of that money that they may have used for travel. So that's where I got that data from. You do with it what you want, but once again, I think that's a reality for many Americans right now, including right here in Kansas City, 913-408-7957. So, the reality is, Joe Biden can look at economic trends and suggest things are getting better. But once again, getting better from what? From 9% inflation 2 years ago? That's going to be difficult to sell the American people on, especially when the polling suggests it's not his strong suit. Leaning in on the economy and suggesting things are better than what you feel they are is not going to be his strong suit. So that's what's got to be watched here as we move forward in the wake of that press conference last night. But he survived, which, by the way, is good for Donald Trump that he survived, despite the fact that, he said a lot of things that made you scratch your head like this.
By getting the job done. Can you name me somebody who's got more major piece of legislation passed in 3.5 years? I created 2,000 jobs this last week. Right. So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it.
Okay.
There's no indication of that yet.
2,000 jobs last week. I think what he meant there is the 200,000 jobs that came in for the month of June in last week's jobs report, which, once again, minor flub. Like, of all the Biden gaffes, that's not one anyone's going to remember. And it's not one that's going to sink him. It's just not. You can chalk that one up, as goofy as it is, to, hey, he kind of lost track of what I was saying, and it happens. You're a human being. Like that. Those are not the kind of gaffes that are going to sink this guy. And by the way, I noticed a flip in the media last night after the fact. I was watching CNN after President Biden addressed the nation yesterday, and it was interesting. They had a panel, like a voter panel, one of those anecdotal voter panels they do, or this one was very anecdotal. They had a reporter up in Michigan, and he was at an adult gym, which I'd never really heard of, like this adult gym facility. I guess you have to be at least 50 years old to go to this adult gym facility in Michigan. And it's 6 or 7 women, all white ladies. It was like, I'm watching it and I'm thinking to myself, okay, aging white liberal ladies in the suburbs walking out of Jazzercise and into their Subarus might be the only constituency that Joe really has left on lockdown. It was like walking into Corinth Square this morning in Prairie Village. It's just like that was the demographic I'm looking at last night on CNN. And they're all admittedly Biden voters. And the question for these Biden voters that CNN was asking is whether or not, and I know somebody's in Corn Square being like, I'm there right now. Give us a call at 913-408-7957. But that was the constituency that CNN was looking to lock down last night. And that's why they had this voter panel in Michigan that consisted mostly of these individuals or exclusively of these individuals. And this is what they were looking to push.
Two of you weren't decided. My question for you, you weren't decided before this happened if you should stay in the race. How do you feel now after watching this news conference?
Relieved, and I think he should stay in.
So your opinion has changed from not sure to he should stay in?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how about you? How do you feel? You weren't sure. How do you feel now?
Same. I think he's the logical choice.
Ah, yes. Old logical Joe. He's the choice. So why would they do that? They have a reporter in a swing state like Michigan. CNN puts this person there. They have 6 or 7 women walking out of this adults only or, seniors only gym. You got to be 50 years old to go to this gym. And they have these women who are probably between, I would say the youngest was maybe in her late 50s, maybe 60 up to 70, 75, which is really, that's like former hippie. That's like Joe Biden's, really, I think that's in large part his base. Because you look now, Gen X, which are those of you from give or take 40 to 55, Gen X is right now much more conservative than the baby boomer generation, which is fascinating to me because that's typically not how it goes. And then millennials are trending a little more slowly to the right, and even Gen Zers. Gen Zers have some of the lowest approval ratings for Joe Biden. Now, whether or not that's policy or age, I don't know, but you're seeing that trend happen as well, especially amongst younger males. So all this happening, and who does CNN decide to go back to? Their bread and butter. Old liberal white ladies, which is right now the base of the party. So that's not an accident that they do that. And to me, that's to send a message. They're basically, I believe, coming to this conclusion that we can't get Joe out of this thing. They spent 2 weeks trying to get him out of this thing. And he's not going. And in fact, there's zero indication that he's going to go anywhere.
The fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again. Secondly, the idea, I served in the Senate a long time. The idea that senators and congressmen running for office worry about the ticket is not unusual.
Yeah.
And I might add, there are at least 5 presidents running or incumbent presidents who had lower numbers than I have now, later in the campaign.
Which, by the way, I couldn't find those numbers anywhere. Like in modern American history, he has the lowest approval rating of any president at this point in his presidency, John.
I think I suck. There were 5 other bums here.
I'm the worst of the suckers.
And he almost whispered.
Yeah, we got the almost whisper as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it really was Wolf of Wall Street-esque.
I'm not leaving.
I'm not leaving.
I'm not leaving.
I'm not leaving. Give me a good whisper, Leo.
I'm not leaving.
Except no one's cheering.
The show goes on.
The difference is Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi are like, damn it, what do we do now? Oh, we got more editing scandals and radio station scandals involving this administration. You know, last hour we just had on Bill Eigel. He's running for governor in Missouri. And trust me, we'll have more of those folks on since we've got, gosh, what, a few weeks left. Let's see. On Tuesday, it'll be 3 weeks until the primary on August 6th, where Missourians will go to the polls and Kansans. But the big one, of course, is the governor's race on the Missouri side. And we'll talk to these candidates in the next 3.5 weeks or so as people start cramming for that final exam. You know, I realized in the last couple of election cycles, I'm probably done talking to too many of these folks for like months before the campaign. The reality is you really start focusing on things like governor's races and all these other races like maybe 4 or 5 weeks out. So we'll hit it heavy the next 3-4 weeks. But I really avoided it for the better part of 6 months because I realized no one cares in January about a governor's race that's coming up in August. It's all like a final exam. We're all cramming here at the last minute, John.
I was going to emphasize that because I get some calls at 8 in the morning on Election Day, and that's a little bit late. Right? I can't fight. Well,
Now's the time.
Yeah.
All right. Now we're focused. But I admit, the show is always changing. It's always growing. And one thing I learned is that no one cares in March about a race in August. But now you do with 3-4 weeks to go. So we had Bill Eigel on last hour. I booked him last night after I heard about the debate that was happening in St. Louis. Bill Eigel's team have never asked, hey, what are we talking about tomorrow? Never asked for the questions. I would never give him the questions. Just said, hey, if he wants to come on, talk about the debate, talk about the race, he's always welcome to. And that's how I do it with anyone who's a candidate who comes on the show. Well, we had the scandal last week where a radio host in Philadelphia was fired because she admitted to giving Joe Biden's team the questions and agreeing to a set list of questions before Biden went on her radio show. Now, I said she shouldn't have been fired. It should be embarrassing for the Biden team, but I don't think you fire the radio host over that. I don't. But now we've got this new radio scandal. So here's what happened. This is for a radio station in Milwaukee. Obviously, it's another key swing state up there in Wisconsin. The RNC is going to be there coming up next week. We will have Bill O'Reilly on the show at 8:35 on Monday. So this time on Monday, make sure you're tuned in and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app because Bill O'Reilly's going to be here. But in addition to drafting the questions, the Biden team asked the Milwaukee radio station to edit out parts of the interview, which they did, including the part where Joe Biden said, I have more blacks in my administration than any other president. The audio of what was cut out leaked, and let's roll this.
In addition to that, I have more blacks in my administration than any other president, all of the presidents combined, and major positions, cabinet positions.
Wait, did he say all administrations combined?
Indeed.
One more time, please.
In addition to that, I have more blacks in my administration than any other president, all of the presidents combined, and major positions, cabinet positions.
Okay, so obviously that's just not true. But this Civic Media, which is a Wisconsin-based progressive talk radio network, said they agreed to make 2 edits to an interview with Joe Biden at the request of his campaign before the broadcast aired. But that since edited out part has leaked, and that's part of what was cut out of the interview. Just a flat-out lie. And, gosh, I mean, at what point do you listen to stuff like that and say, how insulting? How badly do you have to be pandered to? I don't know. I mean, no one really ever panders to me as a straight white guy. Like, no one really cares. And I'm fine with that because I usually try to pick things and pick people and pick businesses I go to based on how good of a job they do. I try to leave the politics out of it for the most part with my music, with my entertainment. I'm not buying Bud Light anytime soon. I do it within reason. But, I don't turn my back on musicians I like because of their politics. I just ignore it. But, man, it's like, gosh, he just can't help himself with some of these, pandering tactics. It's like, working class black Kansas Cityans and black Americans, they may have seen their prices go up 22% the last 40 years, but at least I hire black people or something.
You have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
I mean, it's just like, what are we doing here? The pandering just has no end to it. I don't understand. But you have example after example of now 2 radio stations in back-to-back weeks admitting that they've either just had pre-prepared questions that they're asking the guy and or they've edited out clips. And, I can tell you sitting here firsthand, I've been asked some weird things by candidates, by campaigns, Sometimes asking for more than they frankly are worthy of and deserve, but never been asked to pre-record an interview and then drop things from a said interview. Never been asked saying, hey, I need a list of the questions that we're going to be running down. I mean, those are things that I have not experienced. And now you're doing it with the leader of the free world in some of these key swing states. And I bet you part of it, too, is they just, you're the president, you're the president's team, and you think you can bully, in large part, these guys into saying, hey, we're with the president's team. You're going to do what we say we're going to do. 913-408-7957. I don't know what to do about this text I just got here. Earlier, I was talking about, the CNN panel that I joked consisted of aging, white, liberal women in Wisconsin, or Michigan, who CNN put on last night. And, probably walking out of their jazzercise classes, going into their Subarus. This is on the text line. Pete, I'm a Republican male who drives a Subaru. I think that's worthy of a man card being revoked. I don't know about you. I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, not even a man card. But I will say, I don't know about the voter registration on that one. I'm just throwing that out there. I saw a list one time of like what your likely political affiliation is based on the car that you own. And Subaru was overwhelmingly the liberal vehicle of choice. Not even
mandatory
close.
In Colorado when I was there.
Yes.
Everybody's got one there.
It is mandatory in Colorado. I agree with that. Oh, gosh. 913-408-7957. Oh.
God save the Queen, man.
All right, Dave, Excelsior Springs, what's going on?
Well, my question is, and I think we're missing the point, is what type of a suppository did they create that can turn Joe into somebody who can at least not bumble like he's done for the last 2 years, and this is available to John Q. Public?
Yeah. I don't know. It's like the Wegovy stuff, It was only for diabetics. Now everyone's doing it to get skinny.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say, man. I guess, maybe you can get your hands on some. But I have no idea what that prescription is. I don't know if we're ever going to know what that prescription is, but in the meantime, we'll just sit back, kick our feet up, and roll it out from there, man. That's all we can do on KCMO 95.7 FM.